A woman steps off a train into freezing darkness, clutching a contract that's already worthless. The man who promised her a future has left her to die on the Montana frontier. She collapses on a dirt road, alone, her fingers going numb. But when a silent rancher finds her body in the snow, neither of them knows that this single moment will ignite a war that tears an entire town apart. This is a story about survival, betrayal, and the kind of love that refuses to stay hidden. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The train's whistle cut through the frozen air like a scream. Evelyn Mercer pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window and stared out at the blackness beyond. Montana in January wasn't supposed to look like this. Or maybe it was. Maybe she'd just been foolish enough to imagine something different. The conductor's voice boomed through the rattling car. "Dry Hollow! Last stop! Everyone off!" Evelyn stood slowly, gripping the seat back to steady herself. Her legs ached from 3 days of sitting, her back stiff from sleeping upright. The other passengers shuffled toward the exit. Miners with dirt-crusted boots, a family with too many children and not enough coats, a woman in furs who hadn't looked at anyone the entire trip. She reached for her trunk, the battered leather case that held everything she owned. Teaching certificates. 3 dresses. Her mother's Bible, which she hadn't opened since the funeral. A few books she couldn't afford to replace. The platform was empty when she stepped down. Not a soul waiting. No lanterns, no carriages. Just wind and darkness and the distant howl of something that might have been a coyote. Evelyn stood there, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air, and waited. The train pulled away behind her, its light disappearing into the distance until there was nothing left but the sound of wheels fading into silence. She waited another 10 minutes, then 20. Her fingers started going numb inside her gloves. A door creaked open across the dirt road. A man emerged from what looked like a general store, pulling his coat tight. He glanced at her, then looked away quickly, like he'd seen something he didn't want to acknowledge. Evelyn crossed the road. "Excuse me, sir, I'm looking for Mr. Victor Hale, the school superintendent. I was told he'd meet me here." The man didn't stop walking. "Hale doesn't come out this late. But I sent a telegram 2 weeks ago. He confirmed, don't know nothing about that." He kept moving, his boots crunching over frozen mud. "Please," Evelyn called after him. "I've traveled over 800 miles. I have a contract. I'm the new school teacher." That made him pause. He turned back, squinting at her in the dim light spilling from the store window. "You're the teacher?" "Yes, Evelyn Mercer, from Boston. Mr. Hale hired me by correspondence to. Hale's niece is teaching now." The man's voice was flat, like he was reciting something he'd heard before. "Got the position last week." Evelyn stared at him. "That's not possible. I signed a contract in October. I gave up my position in Boston. I spent every dollar I had to get here." The man shrugged. "Take it up with Hale in the morning. Boarding house is 2 streets down. Mrs. Colby might have a room if you got money." He walked away before she could respond. Evelyn stood there in the freezing street, the wind pulling at her skirt, and felt something crack open inside her chest. She'd left Boston because there was nothing left for her there. Her mother dead. Her father's debt swallowing the house. Her fiancé, former fiancé, who'd decided a school teacher's salary wasn't enough to build a future on and married a banker's daughter instead. The West was supposed to be different, a chance to start over, to matter. And now she was standing in the middle of nowhere with a worthless contract and no way home. She picked up her trunk and started walking. The boarding house was exactly where the man said it would be, a sagging 2-story building with a painted sign that read Colby's Rooms in faded letters. Evelyn climbed the steps and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. The door finally opened. A heavy-set woman in a stained apron glared out at her. "We're full." "I can pay," Evelyn said quickly. "I just need a room for the night. I'll find other arrangements tomorrow." "Didn't you hear me? Full means full. Please. I just arrived. I don't have anywhere else. Should have thought of that before you showed up without a reservation." The woman started to close the door. Evelyn jammed her boot against the frame. "I was supposed to be met at the station. The school superintendent was supposed to." "Victor Hale?" The woman laughed, sharp and bitter. "Let me guess. He promised you a job and didn't bother showing up." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You know about this? Honey, half the people in this town know Hale's a snake. The other half are too scared to say it out loud. She looked Evelyn up and down, her expression softening slightly. You really came all the way from back east for a teaching job? Boston. And he just left you standing there. Evelyn nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Mrs. Colby sighed. I got a storage room in the back, no heat, but it's got a cot and a blanket, $2 a night. Thank you, Evelyn's voice cracked. Thank you so much. The room was barely big enough to turn around in. The cot sagged in the middle, and the blanket smelled like mildew. But Evelyn didn't care. She dropped her trunk on the floor, sat down, and let herself cry for the first time since leaving Boston. She cried for 10 minutes. Then she stopped, wiped her face, and started planning. In the morning, she'd find Victor Hale. She'd show him the contract. She'd demand an explanation. And if he refused to honor the agreement, she'd find another position. There had to be other schools, other towns. She wasn't going back to Boston with nothing. She fell asleep, still wearing her coat. Tek-tek. The knocking started before dawn. Evelyn jerked awake, disoriented, her neck stiff from the angle of the cot. The knocking came again, loud, insistent. She stumbled to the door and opened it. Mrs. Colby stood there with a lamp in one hand and a grim expression. You need to leave. Evelyn blinked. What? Hale sent word. He doesn't want you staying here, says you're not welcome in Dry Hollow. That's absurd. I have a signed contract. Don't matter what you got. Hale runs this town. If he says you leave, you leave. I paid you for the night. And the night's over. Mrs. Colby's voice was hard, but there was something else underneath it. Fear. I'm sorry, girl. I truly am. But I can't afford to cross him. Evelyn felt the floor tilt under her feet. Where am I supposed to go? There's a stage that runs to Helena twice a week. Next one's Thursday. That's 3 days from now. Mrs. Colby's face didn't change. Then I suggest you figure something out. She stepped back and closed the door. Evelyn stood there in the freezing hallway, her trunk at her feet, and understood for the first time what it meant to be completely alone. She dressed quickly, repacked her trunk, and walked back out into the cold. The sky was just starting to lighten, pale gray instead of black. The streets were empty except for a few men heading toward the mines and a dog nosing through garbage behind the saloon. Evelyn walked until she found a bench outside the post office. She sat down, pulled her coat tighter, and tried to think. She had $17 left. Enough for the stage to Helena, maybe. But then what? Another town? Another broken promise? How many times could she start over before there was nothing left to start with? The cold seeped through her skirt, into her bones. She sat there for 2 hours. By mid-morning, her hands were shaking too much to hold her bag steady. She needed to move, needed to get warm. She stood and started walking again, this time toward the edge of town where she'd seen a sign for the schoolhouse. If she was going to leave, she at least wanted to see the building, the place she was supposed to teach, the future she'd been promised. The schoolhouse was a small wooden structure at the end of a dusty road. Evelyn stood outside, staring at the freshly painted sign above the door. Dry Hollow School, Miss Charlotte. Hale, teacher. Charlotte, his niece. Evelyn's hands curled into fists. She turned and walked back toward the center of town, her anger burning hotter than the cold. She found Victor Hale's office above the general store. The door was unlocked. She climbed the stairs and pushed it open without knocking. Hale was sitting behind a desk, a heavy man in his 50s with thinning hair and a face that looked used to getting its way. He glanced up when she entered, his expression barely shifting. Miss Mercer, I presume. You hired me. Evelyn's voice was shaking, but she didn't care. You signed a contract. You confirmed the position in writing. Hale leaned back in his chair. Circumstances changed. That's not an explanation. It's the only one you're getting. Evelyn pulled the contract from her bag and slammed it onto the desk. This is legally binding. You owe me the position or compensation for breach of contract. Hale picked up the paper, glanced at it, then tore it in half. Evelyn's breath stopped. You can take that to a judge if you want, Hale said calmly. But the nearest courthouse is in Helena, and the judge is a friend of mine. You'll spend more money than you'll ever win back. He dropped the torn contract onto the desk. Go home, Miss Mercer. The frontier's no place for women like you. Evelyn's vision blurred. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand what he'd done to her, but she didn't. She turned and walked out. She spent the rest of the day walking the streets of Dry Hollow, trying to figure out what to do next. No one would hire her. The saloon owner laughed when she asked about washing dishes. The dry goods store didn't need help. Even the laundry refused her, saying they had enough workers. By evening, she understood. Hale had made sure no one in town would touch her. She sat on the bench outside the post office again as the sun set, watching families walk past. Mothers pulling children by the hand, men heading home from work. Lives that made sense. And then the cold came back. It wasn't gradual. One moment the air was cool, the next it was vicious. Evelyn stood, shivering, and realized she had nowhere to go. Mrs. Colby wouldn't let her back in. There were no other boarding houses. And she couldn't afford a hotel even if there was one. She picked up her trunk and started walking toward the train station, thinking maybe she could wait inside until morning. But the station was locked. Evelyn stood there, staring at the dark building, and felt the last piece of hope break apart inside her. She couldn't go back to Boston. She couldn't stay here. And she couldn't survive a night outside in this cold. She started walking anyway, because there was nothing else to do. The road out of town was frozen solid. The ruts from wagon wheels turned to stone. Evelyn stumbled more than once, her trunk banging against her leg, her breath coming in short gasps. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stop. The lights of Dry Hollow disappeared behind her. The sky turned black, and the wind picked up, cutting through her coat like it wasn't even there. Evelyn kept walking. Her feet went numb first, then her hands, then her face. She dropped the trunk because she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. She kept walking. Her legs stopped working right. She fell once, caught herself, kept moving. Fell again. This time she didn't get up. She lay there on the frozen road, staring up at the stars, and thought about her mother. Her mother who'd told her to be brave, to take chances, to build a life worth living. Evelyn closed her eyes. She didn't hear the horse until it was right beside her. Caleb Ryder didn't make a habit of riding at night, but the fence line on the southern pasture had come down, and if he didn't fix it before morning, he'd lose half the herd to wandering, so he'd saddled up and ridden out, figuring he'd be back before midnight. He was halfway home when he saw the shape on the road. At first he thought it was a dead animal, coyote maybe, or a deer that had been hit by a wagon, but when he got closer he realized it was a person, a woman. Caleb dismounted and crouched beside her, his hand going to her neck to check for a pulse. Still alive. Barely. Her skin was ice cold, her lips blue. She wasn't moving. He didn't think. He just lifted her onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and rode. His ranch was 3 miles south. He pushed the horse harder than he should have. The woman's body slumped against him, her head lolling with each stride. When he reached the house, he carried her inside and laid her on the floor in front of the fireplace. He threw more logs onto the fire, stoked it until the flames roared, then grabbed every blanket he could find and piled them on top of her. Her breathing was shallow, too shallow. Caleb pulled off her frozen gloves and started rubbing her hands, trying to get the blood moving again. Her fingers were stiff, the skin pale and waxy. He worked for 20 minutes before she finally stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dark, unfocused. "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't talk," Caleb said. "Just breathe." She tried to sit up. He pushed her back down gently. "You were half dead on the road. You need to stay still." She stared at him, her eyes sharpening slightly. "Who are you?" "Caleb Ryder." "I don't—" She stopped, her face twisting in pain. "My trunk. I dropped it." "Forget the trunk. Everything I own is not worth dying for." Caleb stood and walked to the kitchen, returning with a cup of water. He helped her sit up enough to drink. She took a sip, then another, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped the cup. "What were you doing out there?" Caleb asked. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Leaving? In the middle of the night? In January?" "I didn't have a choice." Caleb studied her. She was young, mid-20s maybe. Thin, pale, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "You came on the train yesterday," he said. She blinked. How did you know? Only train that stops in Dry Hollow comes on Wednesdays, and you don't look like you're from around here. Evelyn almost laughed, but it came out bitter. I was supposed to be the new school teacher, but the superintendent decided to give the job to someone else instead. Caleb's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Victor Hale. You know him? Everyone knows him. Then you know he's a liar. Caleb didn't argue. Evelyn closed her eyes, her body sagging against the blankets. I shouldn't have come here. I should have stayed in Boston. Why didn't you? Because there was nothing left for me there. She opened her eyes again, staring at the ceiling. And I thought maybe out here I could be something different. Something better. Caleb didn't respond. He just stood there watching her, his face unreadable. After a long silence, Evelyn spoke again. Thank you for not leaving me on that road. Don't thank me yet. Why not? Because I don't know what you're going to do next. Caleb crossed his arms. You can stay here tonight, get warm, eat something, but come morning, you need a plan. I don't have one. Then you better start thinking. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she nodded. Caleb turned and walked toward the back of the house, leaving her alone by the fire. She pulled the blankets tighter around herself and stared into the flames, trying to figure out how her life had fallen apart so completely in less than 24 hours. And trying not to think about the fact that the only person who'd helped her was a stranger who clearly didn't want her here. By morning, Evelyn could move without her whole body screaming. She sat up slowly, testing her fingers and toes. Everything still worked, though her feet ached and her hands felt raw. The fire had died down to embers. The house was quiet. She stood, folding the blankets carefully, and looked around. The room was sparse. Wooden floor, a few chairs, a table scarred with use. No decorations, no photographs. Nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. Evelyn walked toward the kitchen and found Caleb standing at the stove, frying eggs in a cast-iron pan. You're up, he said without turning around. I didn't mean to sleep so long. You needed it. He slid the eggs onto a plate and set it on the table. Eat. Evelyn sat, her stomach twisting with hunger the moment she smelled the food. She ate quickly, trying not to look desperate, even though she was. Caleb poured coffee and sat across from her, watching her in that same unreadable way. What's your plan? He asked. Evelyn swallowed. I don't know yet. Stage to Helena runs Thursday. I know. She set down her fork. But I don't have enough money to start over somewhere else. And even if I did, what's stopping the same thing from happening again? Caleb's jaw tightened. You think all towns are like Dry Hollow? I think men like Victor Hale are everywhere. Maybe. He took a sip of coffee. But not everyone lets them win. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was older than she'd thought, maybe late 30s. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. His hands were scarred, his face weathered. He didn't look like someone who smiled often. Why did you help me? She asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. He stared into his coffee like he was deciding how much to say. Because I know what it's like to be left for dead, he said finally. Evelyn waited for him to continue, but he didn't. The silence stretched between them. Then Caleb stood, carrying his cup to the sink. You can stay here another day if you need to, but after that, you're on your own. I understand. He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her. There's kids around here who need a teacher. Evelyn frowned. What do you mean? Ranch kids, immigrant families, workers' children. None of them go to Hale's school because they're not allowed. Why not? Because Hale decides who's worthy of an education, and poor kids don't make the list. Evelyn's chest tightened. That's how it works out here. Caleb's voice was flat. You want to teach? There's kids who need teaching. You just won't get paid for it. He walked out before she could respond. Evelyn sat there, staring at the empty doorway, and felt something shift inside her. She'd come west to start over, to matter. Maybe this was how. Evelyn spent the rest of that morning walking the perimeter of Caleb's ranch, trying to make sense of what he'd offered her. Not an offer, really. More like a challenge. The ranch stretched farther than she could see. Rolling hills dotted with cattle, fence lines cutting across brown grass, outbuildings clustered near the main house. In the distance, she could make out a few workers moving between structures, their voices carrying on the cold air. She stopped at what looked like an old storage barn, its doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Through the gaps in the wood, she could see broken crates, tangled rope, years of abandonment. That's where you'd do it. Evelyn spun around. Caleb stood a few feet behind her, his coat dusted with snow. Do what? Teach. He nodded toward the barn. If you're serious about staying. Evelyn looked back at the structure. This is a storage barn. Was. Nobody's used it in 5 years. Caleb walked past her and pushed one of the doors open. It groaned on its hinges, revealing a space roughly 30 feet long and 20 wide. Dirt floor, holes in the roof, a smell like rotting wood and mice. You want me to teach children in this? I want you to decide if you're going to feel sorry for yourself or do something about it. Caleb's voice was sharp. You said you wanted to matter. Here's your chance. Evelyn stepped inside, her boots crunching on debris. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the walls, illuminating dust that hung in the air like smoke. It was a disaster, but it was also a space, a possibility. How many children are we talking about? She asked. 15, maybe 20. Depends on who shows up. And their parents would allow this? Caleb's expression darkened. Some of them won't have a choice. Their kids work the ranch. I can give them time off to learn if I want. That's not the same as wanting an education. No, Caleb admitted. But it's a start. Evelyn turned in a slow circle, taking in the broken crates, the dirt, the cold seeping through the walls. This would take weeks to repair, months even. I'd need materials, furniture, books. I've got materials, furniture we can build, books. He paused. You'll have to figure that part out. And what do you get out of this? The question hung between them. Caleb's jaw tightened. I get to watch Victor Hale realize he doesn't control everything in this territory. Evelyn studied him. There was something personal in his voice, something raw. What did he do to you? She asked quietly. Caleb didn't answer. He turned and walked out of the barn, leaving her standing alone in the wreckage. Chod. That afternoon, Evelyn found herself scrubbing dirt off the barn floor with a brush and a bucket of freezing water. It was stupid. She knew it was stupid. She didn't have a plan, didn't have permission from anyone, didn't even know if a single child would show up. But she couldn't stop. Caleb appeared an hour later with 2 ranch hands, a young Mexican man named Mateo and an older Irish worker named Brennan. They didn't ask questions. They just started hauling out broken crates and clearing debris. By evening, the barn was empty. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her hands raw and her back aching, and looked at the bare space. It still wasn't much, but it was something. Caleb walked up beside her. You'll need a stove. Gets too cold in here without heat. I know. And benches. Can't have kids sitting on the floor. I know that too. He nodded, almost to himself. I'll talk to the carpenter in town, see what he can do. Evelyn glanced at him. Why are you doing this? I told you. No. She turned to face him fully. You said you wanted to prove something to Victor Hale, but this is more than that. You're spending money, time, resources, on children who aren't even yours. Caleb's expression went cold. Don't assume you know anything about me. I'm not assuming. I'm asking. For a moment she thought he'd walk away again, but he didn't. I had a daughter once, he said quietly. She died when she was 6 months old, fever. My wife went 3 weeks later. Same thing. Evelyn's breath caught. I thought about burning this whole place down after that, Caleb continued. Couldn't see the point of keeping it going, but then I realized something. He looked at her, his eyes hard. The world doesn't care if you give up. It just keeps moving, and men like Hale keep winning because people like us stop fighting. Evelyn didn't know what to say. So yeah, Caleb said, I'm doing this for myself as much as anyone else. If that's not good enough for you, you can leave. I didn't say that. Then stop asking questions and start teaching. He walked away before she could respond. The first child arrived 3 days later. Evelyn was inside the barn, arranging the rough wooden benches Brennan had built, when she heard footsteps outside. She turned and saw a small girl standing in the doorway, maybe 7 years old, with tangled black hair and a dress that was too big for her. Are you the teacher? The girl asked. Evelyn's heart jumped. Yes, I'm Miss Mercer. The girl looked around the barn, her expression skeptical. My papa said you're teaching kids here for free. That's right. Why? Evelyn crouched down to the girl's level. Because I think everyone deserves a chance to learn. What's your name? Lena. Lena Chen. Well, Lena Chen, would you like to learn how to read? Lena's eyes widened. I already know some letters. My mama taught me before she stopped, her face closing off. Evelyn's chest tightened. Before what? Before she went away. Evelyn didn't push. She just smiled gently. Then maybe you can help me teach the other children when they get here. Lena's face brightened. Really? Really? By the end of the week, 6 more children had arrived. 2 boys from a German family who worked the northern pastures. A Mexican girl named Rosa, whose father was one of Caleb's ranch hands. 3 siblings, Irish, skinny, with matching red hair and freckles, whose mother worked in the laundry in town. None of them had ever been inside a school before. Evelyn started with the basics. Letters, numbers, simple words scratched onto slates she'd bought with the last of her money. The children were hungry for it. Lena picked up reading faster than Evelyn expected, her small fingers tracing the letters like they were treasures. Rosa struggled with English but excelled at numbers, solving arithmetic problems in her head before anyone else finished writing them down. The Irish boys, Daniel, Patrick, and Sean, couldn't sit still for more than 10 minutes, but they memorized everything she said and repeated it back perfectly days later. It wasn't perfect. The barn was freezing even with the stove. The roof still leaked when it rained. Half the children showed up late because they had chores to finish first. But it was working, and for the first time since leaving Boston, Evelyn felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Keep States. Caleb watched from a distance, more often than he'd admit. He'd ride past the barn on his way to check the fence lines and hear the sound of children's voices reciting letters. He'd see Evelyn through the gaps in the walls, standing at the front of the room with chalk in her hand. Her face lit up in a way that made her look younger. It unsettled him. He told himself this was about proving a point, about giving Hale a middle finger, about making sure the ranch kids had a chance his own daughter never got. But watching Evelyn work, watching her pour everything she had into those children, it stirred something he thought had died years ago. Hope. And hope was dangerous. One afternoon, he found her sitting outside the barn, her head in her hands. "What's wrong?" he asked. Evelyn looked up, her eyes red. "Lena's father came by today. He said he's pulling her out of school." "Why?" "Because he's afraid." Evelyn's voice cracked. "He said people in town are talking, saying I'm filling the children's heads with ideas that'll make them forget where they come from." Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's Hale's doing." "I know, but what am I supposed to do about it?" She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. "I thought if I just taught them, if I stayed out of everyone's way, it would be fine. But it's not fine. Parents are scared, and I don't know how to fight that." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You can't fight fear with logic. You fight it by proving them wrong." "How?" "Keep teaching. Keep showing up. Let the kids prove what they can do." He paused. "And stop worrying about what people in town think. They're always going to talk." Evelyn wiped her eyes. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy, but it's simple." He turned to walk away, then stopped. "And for what it's worth, you're doing better than you think." Evelyn watched him go, his words settling over her like a blanket she didn't know she needed. By the end of the second month, the school had grown to 15 children. Word had spread quietly through the immigrant families and ranch workers. There was a teacher at Iron Creek Ridge who didn't care where you came from or how much money you had. All you had to do was show up. Evelyn started holding classes 6 days a week, splitting the children into groups based on age and skill. The older ones helped teach the younger ones. She borrowed books from anyone who had them and copied lessons by hand when she didn't. It was exhausting. Her hands were always covered in chalk dust. Her voice went hoarse from talking all day. She fell into bed every night too tired to think. But the children were learning. Daniel could write his full name now. Rosa was doing multiplication. Lena had read an entire book cover to cover and cried when she finished it. And then Victor Hale showed up. Evelyn was in the middle of a geography lesson when she heard the horses outside. She looked up and saw 3 men dismounting, Hale in the center, flanked by 2 others she didn't recognize. The children went silent. "Stay here," Evelyn told them quietly. She stepped outside and closed the barn door behind her. Hale smiled when he saw her. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Miss Mercer, I heard you've been busy." "Mr. Hale." Evelyn's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. "What can I do for you?" "I'm here to inform you that operating an unlicensed school is illegal in this territory. I'm not charging tuition. This isn't a licensed institution. It's private instruction on private land." Hale's smile widened. "You've been studying the law. How industrious." He glanced at the barn. "Tell me, do the parents of these children know what you're teaching them?" "They know their children are learning to read and write." "Are they learning anything else? Any ideas about their place in the world? About rights they don't actually have?" Evelyn's hands curled into fists. "I'm teaching them facts, history, mathematics. If that threatens you, that says more about you than it does about me." Hale's expression darkened. "Careful, Miss Mercer. You're a guest on Mr. Ryder's property, and guests can be asked to leave." "Then Mr. Ryder can ask me himself." "I'm sure he will, once he understands what kind of woman you really are." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Hale leaned closer, his voice dropping. "It means I know why you left Boston. I know about your debts, your broken engagement, the fact that you had nowhere else to go." He straightened. "And I know desperate women do desperate things to secure their futures." "You think I'm—" Evelyn's voice shook with fury. "You think I'm manipulating Caleb Ryder?" "I think you saw an opportunity and took it. And I think when people around here find out the truth, they'll pull their children so fast you won't have time to pack your bags." "Get off this property!" Both Evelyn and Hale turned. Caleb stood 20 feet away, his rifle resting on his shoulder. Hale's smile didn't falter. "Caleb, good to see you." "I said get off my property. I'm simply having a conversation. You're spreading lies about a woman who's doing more for this community than you've ever done." Caleb walked closer, his eyes locked on Hale. "And if you set foot on my land again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Hale's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake, Caleb." "Wouldn't be the first time." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Hale turned and walked back to his horse. He mounted, looked down at Evelyn one last time, and said, "This isn't over." He rode off, his men following. Evelyn stood there, shaking, her breath coming too fast. Caleb lowered the rifle. "You all right?" "He's going to destroy this." Evelyn's voice cracked. "He's going to turn everyone against me." "Probably." "Then what do I do?" Caleb looked at her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. "You keep teaching, and you let me handle Hale. You can't fight him alone." "I'm not alone." He nodded toward the barn. "You've got 15 families who believe in what you're doing. That's more than Hale's ever had." Evelyn wanted to believe him, but the fear sitting in her chest wouldn't let go. Gishim. That night, Caleb found her sitting outside the barn, staring at the stars. He sat down beside her without asking. "I should leave," Evelyn said quietly, "before this gets worse." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're not a quitter." Caleb's voice was certain. "You came here with nothing and built something people are willing to fight for. That's not something you walk away from." Evelyn looked at him. "Why do you have so much faith in me?" "Because I've seen what happens when people give up, and I don't want to see it again." The silence between them felt different this time, heavier, like something unspoken was pressing against both of them, waiting to be said. "I didn't manipulate you," Evelyn said finally. "I hope you know that." "I know." "Then why did Hale say it?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Because he knows the fastest way to destroy someone is to make people doubt their intentions." "And you don't doubt mine?" "No." The word was so simple, so absolute, that Evelyn felt something crack open inside her. "Thank you," she whispered. Caleb nodded. He stood, brushing dirt off his pants, and started to walk away. "Caleb?" He stopped. "Why didn't you tell me about your daughter before?" He didn't turn around. "Because talking about her doesn't bring her back. But keeping her a secret doesn't help either." Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Her name was Anna, and she would have been 7 this year. Evelyn's throat tightened. I'm sorry. So am I. He walked back toward the house, leaving her alone under the stars. The rumors started the next week. Parents who'd been sending their children to the school suddenly stopped. One by one, families pulled out, offering weak excuses about needing help with chores or not having time. But Evelyn knew the truth. Hale was spreading his poison, and it was working. By the end of the month, only 8 children remained. Lena, Rosa, the 3 Irish boys, a pair of German siblings, and one quiet Chinese boy named June whose father worked in the stables. Evelyn kept teaching. She refused to give Hale the satisfaction of quitting, but every empty seat felt like a wound. One morning she found Lena crying outside the barn. What's wrong? Evelyn crouched beside her. My papa says I can't come anymore. Lena's voice broke. He says people are saying bad things about you, that you're trying to make us forget who we are. Evelyn's heart shattered. Lena, listen to me. You haven't forgotten who you are. You've learned who you can be. And that's not the same thing. But what if my papa's right? What if learning all this stuff makes me different? Different isn't bad. It is if it means I don't belong anywhere. Evelyn pulled the girl into a hug, feeling her small body shake with sobs. You belong here, Evelyn whispered, with me, with the other children. You belong wherever you decide you belong. Lena pulled back, wiping her eyes. Can I come tomorrow? Do you want to? Lena nodded. Then you come, and you let me worry about your papa. The next day, Lena didn't show up. Neither did Rosa. By the end of the week, only the 3 Irish boys and June remained. Evelyn stood in the empty barn, staring at the rows of benches she'd worked so hard to fill, and felt the weight of failure press down on her. Maybe Hale was right. Maybe she'd been foolish to think she could change anything. She was still standing there when Caleb walked in. They're pulling out, she said without turning around. I know. I failed them. No. Caleb's voice was firm. Hale failed them. Their parents failed them. You gave them a chance. That's more than anyone else has ever done. Evelyn finally looked at him. 4 children, Caleb. I have 4 children left. Then you teach those 4. For how long? Until Hale convinces them to leave too? Caleb crossed the room and stood in front of her. You want to know what I think? What? I think you're scared, and I think you're looking for a reason to quit because it hurts less than fighting. Evelyn's chest tightened. That's not fair. It's true. Caleb's eyes locked on hers. You didn't come all this way to teach 4 kids. You came to prove something, to yourself and everyone else. So prove it. How? By not giving up. Evelyn stared at him, her vision blurring. And then, without thinking, she stepped forward and kissed him. It was desperate and messy and probably a mistake. Caleb froze for half a second. Then his hands came up to her face, and he kissed her back like he'd been wanting to for months. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. I can't do this, Evelyn whispered. Why not? Because if Hale finds out, let him. Caleb's voice was rough. I'm done hiding what I care about. Evelyn's heart pounded. You care about me? You know I do. She did know. She'd known for weeks, maybe longer. But knowing and admitting were 2 different things. This complicates everything, she said. Everything was already complicated. Evelyn almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she leaned her forehead against his chest and let herself breathe. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. They didn't talk about the kiss. Not the next morning when Evelyn walked to the barn and found Caleb already there, fixing a broken hinge on the door. Not that afternoon when he brought her firewood without being asked. Not that evening when their hands brushed while reaching for the same coffee cup and both of them pulled back like they'd been burned. But it sat between them anyway, heavy and undeniable. Evelyn tried to focus on the 4 children who still showed up every day. Daniel, Patrick, and Sean, the Irish boys, arrived early and stayed late, their hunger for learning so fierce it made her chest ache. June was quieter, but his careful attention to every word she said told her he was absorbing everything. She taught them history, grammar, basic mathematics. She read to them from the few books she had and made them practice writing until their hands cramped. It wasn't enough. She knew it wasn't enough, but it was all she had. On the 5th day after the kiss, Caleb appeared in the barn doorway just as she was dismissing the boys for the afternoon. "Got something to show you," he said. Evelyn frowned. "What?" "Come on." She followed him outside where a wagon sat loaded with wooden crates. Caleb climbed into the bed and pried one open. Books. Dozens of them. Evelyn's breath caught. "Where did you get these?" "Sent away for them. Took 3 weeks to arrive." He lifted one out, a worn copy of Robinson Crusoe. Figured the kids need more than just primers. Evelyn took the book from him, running her fingers over the cracked leather cover. "Caleb, this must have cost—" "Don't care what it cost. You can't keep spending money on this. It's my money." His voice was firm. "And I'll spend it how I want." Evelyn looked up at him, standing there in the wagon bed with dirt on his boots and determination in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. He climbed down and started unloading crates. Evelyn joined him, and together they carried the books inside, stacking them on the shelves Brennan had built along the back wall. When the last crate was empty, Evelyn stood in the center of the barn and looked around. The space that had been a wreck 3 months ago now felt like a real school. Rough, yes. Imperfect, but real. "You did this," Caleb said from behind her. "We did this." "No." He shook his head. "I just gave you a place to work. You're the one who made it matter." Evelyn turned to face him. "It doesn't matter if no one comes." 4 kids are coming. 4 out of 20. Then we get the other 16 back." "How?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "We make it impossible for their parents to say no." 2 days later, Evelyn stood in front of a group of ranch workers gathered outside the bunkhouse and tried not to let her hands shake. Caleb had called the meeting without telling her. She'd only found out an hour before when Mateo mentioned it in passing. By the time she tracked Caleb down to demand an explanation, he was already walking toward the assembled crowd. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Giving you an audience." He stopped at the edge of the group. "You want parents to trust you? Show them what their kids are learning." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can." He looked at her. "You're a teacher, so teach." And then he stepped aside, leaving her standing alone in front of 30 skeptical faces. Evelyn swallowed hard. Most of these men and women had pulled their children from the school. Some of them wouldn't even meet her eyes. "I know what you've heard about me," she started. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "That I'm here to change your children, to fill their heads with ideas that'll make them forget where they come from." No one spoke. "And maybe that's true," Evelyn continued. "Maybe learning to read will change them. Maybe understanding history and mathematics will make them see the world differently." She paused. "But is that really such a terrible thing?" A woman near the back, Rosa's mother, crossed her arms. "My daughter don't need to read to work in a kitchen." "You're right," Evelyn said. "She doesn't. But what if she wants to do something else? What if she wants to own the kitchen instead of just working in it? That's not how the world works for people like us." "Only because we accept that it doesn't." Evelyn's voice grew stronger. "I'm not trying to make your children forget who they are. I'm trying to give them choices you never had." "Choices don't put food on the table," a man called out. "No, but knowledge does." Evelyn looked around the group. "How many of you have been cheated because you couldn't read a contract? How many have lost money because you couldn't do the math fast enough to catch someone's lie?" The silence that followed was different now, uncomfortable. "I had a student named Lena," Evelyn said quietly. 6 years old. Couldn't write her own name when she first came to me. 3 weeks later, she read an entire book cover to cover. And you know what she said when she finished? No one answered. She said, "I didn't know words could do that." She didn't know stories could make her feel things. Didn't know learning could be anything other than punishment. Evelyn's throat tightened. And when her father pulled her out of school, she cried, because for the first time in her life, she understood what she was losing. Rosa's mother looked away. "I'm not asking you to trust me," Evelyn said. "I'm asking you to trust your children. Let them decide if education is worth having. And if they choose to walk away, I'll respect that, but at least give them the chance to choose." She stopped talking. The crowd shifted, murmuring among themselves. Then June's father stepped forward. He was a small man, wiry and weathered, with hands scarred from years of stable work. "My son comes home different now," he said in halting English. "He asks questions, wants to know why things are the way they are." He paused. "I don't always have answers, but I see him thinking, and that is not a bad thing." Another voice spoke up, one of the German fathers. "My boys say Miss Mercer treats them the same as everyone else. No one's ever done that before." "Because she wants something from you," a woman snapped. "She's using your kids to get close to Mr. Ryder." Evelyn's face burned, but before she could respond, Caleb stepped forward. "You think I need someone to manipulate me into doing what I want?" His voice was cold. "I opened this school because I chose to. Miss Mercer didn't ask for my help. I offered it. And if you've got a problem with that, take it up with me, not her." The woman's face flushed, but she didn't argue. Caleb looked around the group. "Anyone who wants to send their kids back to school can start tomorrow. Anyone who doesn't, that's your choice. But stop blaming Miss Mercer for giving your children something you're too scared to want for them." He turned and walked away, leaving the crowd in stunned silence. Evelyn stood there, her heart pounding, unsure if she'd just won or lost. Then Rosa's mother spoke. "My daughter can come back?" Evelyn's breath caught. "Yes, of course. What time does class start?" 8 o'clock. The woman nodded. "She'll be there." One by one, other parents stepped forward. Not all of them, maybe half, but it was enough. By the time Evelyn walked back to the barn, her hands were shaking so badly she had to sit down. Caleb found her there 20 minutes later. "You did good," he said. "You're the one who defended me." "I just told the truth." He sat down beside her. "You're the one who made them listen." Evelyn leaned her head against the barn wall. "What if I can't live up to what I promised?" "You already are." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." Caleb's voice was quiet. "Because I've watched you fight for those kids like they're your own. And that's not something you can fake." Evelyn closed her eyes, letting his words settle over her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of failing them. Of failing you. Of this whole thing falling apart. Then we'll build it back." Caleb's hand found hers, his fingers rough and warm. "That's what people do. They build. They fail. They build again." Evelyn squeezed his hand, holding on like it was the only solid thing in the world. By the following week, 12 children had returned. Lena showed up first, her face glowing with relief. Rosa came next, dragging her younger brother with her. The German boys arrived with their cousins. Even a few new faces appeared, children Evelyn had never seen before, sent by parents who'd heard about the meeting and decided to give the school a chance. The barn felt alive again. Evelyn split the students into groups: beginners, intermediate, and advanced. She taught reading in the mornings and mathematics in the afternoons. The older children helped the younger ones, and slowly, the space began to hum with the kind of energy that made Evelyn remember why she'd wanted to teach in the first place. But the victory was fragile. Parents still whispered, people in town still spread rumors, and Victor Hale still watched from a distance, waiting for his moment. That moment came on a cold morning in early March. Evelyn was in the middle of a lesson on fractions when she heard shouting outside. She told the children to stay seated and stepped out of the barn. A man stood in the yard, his face twisted with rage. Luis Ortega, one of the ranch workers whose son had attended school briefly before being pulled out, and he was dragging a boy by the arm. "You!" Luis shouted when he saw Evelyn. "You did this!" Evelyn's stomach dropped. The boy, Miguel, maybe 10 years old, had a split lip and a bruise darkening his cheek. "What happened?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaking. "He lied to me." Luis shook Miguel hard enough to make the boy stumble. "Said he was helping in the stables. But I found him here, hiding behind the barn, listening to your lessons." "I didn't mean to," Miguel started, but his father backhanded him across the face. "Stop!" Evelyn shouted. She ran forward, putting herself between Luis and the boy. "Don't touch him again." Luis's eyes blazed. "He's my son. I'll do what I want." "Not while I'm standing here, you won't." "You think you can tell me how to raise my boy?" Luis stepped closer, his breath reeking of alcohol. "You think because you got Ryder wrapped around your finger, you can do whatever you want?" I think beating a child for wanting to learn is wrong. Evelyn's voice was steel. And if you lay another hand on him, I'll make sure everyone on this ranch knows what kind of man you are. Luis's face went red. You threatening me? I'm protecting him. He don't need protecting from me. He needs protecting from you. Luis grabbed for Miguel, but Evelyn shoved the boy behind her. Miguel stays with me. The hell he does. Luis lunged. Evelyn braced herself, but before he could reach her, someone yanked him backward. Caleb. He slammed Luis against the barn wall hard enough to rattle the boards. Touch her again, and I'll break your arm. Luis struggled, but Caleb's grip didn't budge. She's filling my son's head with lies. Your son wanted to learn. That's not a lie. That's ambition. Caleb's voice was deadly calm. And if you can't see the difference, you're a bigger fool than I thought. You can't keep him from me. He's my blood. Then act like it. Caleb shoved him away. Get off my property, and don't come back until you're sober. Luis staggered, his eyes wild. He looked at Miguel, then at Evelyn, then back at Caleb. This isn't over, he spat. Yeah, it is. Caleb stepped between Luis and the barn. Now go. Luis hesitated for one more moment. Then he turned and stumbled toward the road, cursing under his breath. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. She turned to Miguel, who was crying silently, his shoulders shaking. Come here, she said gently. The boy collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Caleb stood nearby, his jaw tight, his hands still clenched into fists. He can't go home, Evelyn said quietly. I know. Luis will kill him if he goes back. I know. Caleb exhaled slowly. He'll stay here tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Evelyn looked up at him, her throat tight. Thank you. Caleb nodded, but his expression was dark, because they both knew what this meant. The fight wasn't just about education anymore. It was about power, control. And men like Luis and Hale weren't going to let go without a war. Basik. That night, Evelyn sat with Miguel in the main house, while Caleb talked to Mateo and Brennan outside. The boy had stopped crying, but he hadn't spoken either. He just sat on the floor near the fireplace, staring at the flames. You're safe here, Evelyn said quietly. Miguel didn't respond. I know you're scared, but your father, what he did, that wasn't your fault. He hates me. Miguel's voice was barely a whisper. He doesn't hate you. He said I'm worthless. Said I'll never be anything. Evelyn's chest ached. He's wrong. How do you know? Because I've seen what you can do. You're smart, Miguel. You pick up things faster than most of the other kids, and that's not something your father can take away from you. Miguel finally looked at her. What if he makes me go back? We won't let him. How? Evelyn didn't have an answer for that. The door opened and Caleb walked in. He crossed to the fireplace and crouched beside Miguel. You're staying here tonight, Caleb said. Tomorrow we'll talk to your mother. See what she wants to do. She won't go against him. Miguel's voice was hollow. She's too scared. Maybe. But we'll try anyway. Caleb's tone was firm. And if she won't help, we'll find another way. Why are you doing this? Miguel asked. I'm not your kid. Caleb was quiet for a moment. No, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve better. Miguel's eyes filled with tears again, but he didn't look away. Evelyn watched the two of them, this broken boy and this guarded man, and felt something crack open inside her. Caleb wasn't just helping Miguel because it was the right thing to do. He was helping because he understood what it felt like to lose something you couldn't get back. And maybe, in some small way, saving this boy was a way of saving the daughter he'd never been able to protect. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of horses. She bolted upright, her heart pounding, and looked out the window. A group of men stood in the yard. 8, maybe 10. Some of them she recognized, workers from neighboring ranches. Others were strangers. And at the front of the group was Victor Hale. Evelyn dressed quickly and ran outside. Caleb was already there, standing between Hale and the house with his rifle in hand. What do you want, Hale? Caleb's voice was ice. I'm here on official business. Hale gestured to a man beside him, a tall, thin figure in a dusty coat with a marshal's badge pinned to his chest. Marshal Teague has some questions for Miss Mercer. Evelyn stepped forward. What kind of questions? The marshal looked her over with cold eyes. You're accused of running an unlicensed educational institution and harboring a minor child without parental consent. That's absurd. Evelyn's voice shook with anger. This school is private instruction on private land, and the child you're referring to was beaten by his father. I'm protecting him. According to the law, parents have the right to discipline their children as they see fit, the marshal said. And taking a child from his legal guardian is kidnapping. He's not kidnapped. He's safe. That's not for you to decide. Caleb stepped forward. You want to arrest someone? Arrest Luis Ortega for assault. The boy's got bruises to prove it. I've spoken to Mr. Ortega, the marshal said. He claims the boy injured himself working the ranch. That's a lie. Your word against his. The marshal's gaze shifted to Evelyn. Unless you've got witnesses willing to testify. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She looked around the yard. A few ranch workers stood nearby, watching silently. But none of them moved. None of them spoke. They were too scared. I didn't think so, Hale said smoothly. Now, Miss Mercer, you have two options. You can return the boy to his father and close this school immediately, or Marshal Teague will place you under arrest, and the boy will be removed by force. You can't do this, Evelyn said. I already am. Caleb raised his rifle slightly. She's not going anywhere. Caleb, the marshal's voice turned sharp. Don't make this worse than it needs to be. Worse? Caleb's laugh was bitter. You're threatening to arrest a woman for protecting a child. How much worse can it get? Put the gun down. No. The tension in the yard stretched tight, ready to snap, and then a small voice cut through the silence. Wait. Everyone turned. Miguel stood on the porch, his face pale but his jaw set. I'll go back, he said. No. Evelyn's voice broke. Miguel, you don't have to. It's okay, Miss Mercer. The boy's eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Miguel, please. He looked at her. I'll be okay. Evelyn felt like the ground was collapsing under her feet. Caleb lowered the rifle slowly, his face twisted with rage and helplessness. The marshal nodded to one of his men, who walked over and took Miguel by the arm. Wait! A voice shouted. A woman pushed through the crowd. Miguel's mother, a thin, tired-looking woman with gray streaks in her black hair. He's not going back to Luis, she said. The marshal frowned. Mrs. Ortega, I said he's not going back. Her voice was shaking, but she didn't back down. Luis almost killed him yesterday. I won't let him do it again. You're his wife. You don't have the authority. Then I'll leave Luis. She stepped closer to Miguel, her hand reaching for his. My son stays here. With Miss Mercer, where he's safe. The crowd murmured. Hale's face darkened. You can't be serious. I am. Mrs. Ortega's voice was stronger now. And if you try to take him, I'll tell everyone in this territory what kind of man my husband really is. I'll tell them about the bruises, the broken bones, the nights Miguel spent locked in the barn because Luis was too drunk to remember he had a son. The marshal shifted uncomfortably. Hale's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. The law is clear. The law is also clear about child abuse, Caleb said. And if Mrs. Ortega is willing to testify, you've got a real problem on your hands. The marshal looked between them, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stepped back. I'll need to file a report, but for now, the boy stays with his mother. Hale's face went red. That's my decision, the marshal said firmly. He looked at Evelyn. As for the school, I'll be watching. If there's any indication you're operating outside the law, I'll shut you down. Understood, Evelyn said quietly. The marshal nodded. He mounted his horse, and most of the men followed, but Hale didn't move. He stared at Evelyn with pure hatred in his eyes. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, Caleb said. It is. Hale turned and rode away, his men trailing behind him. The moment they were gone, Evelyn's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, shaking. Caleb knelt beside her. You okay? She nodded, even though she wasn't. Miguel ran to his mother, and the two of them held each other, crying. The other workers stood silent, watching. And Evelyn realized something. They'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning. The days after the confrontation felt like waiting for a storm that never quite broke. Evelyn taught her classes with one eye always on the door, half expecting Hale to return with more men and angrier accusations. The children sensed her tension. They grew quieter, more careful, like they were afraid that laughing too loud might bring trouble down on all of them. Miguel stayed at the ranch. His mother moved into one of the small workers' cabins, taking cleaning work to pay her way. Luis sent word through intermediaries that he wanted his family back, but Mrs. Ortega refused every time. She'd made her choice, and she wasn't backing down. But the cost of that choice showed in her face. She looked 10 years older than she had a month ago, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights and the weight of what she'd done. Evelyn found her one afternoon sitting outside the cabin, mending one of Miguel's shirts. "How are you holding up?" Evelyn asked. Mrs. Ortega didn't look up. "I keep thinking he's going to show up, drag us both back. Caleb won't let that happen. Mr. Ryder's done more than enough already. This isn't his fight." "He's made it his fight." Evelyn sat down beside her. "And so have I." Mrs. Ortega's hand stilled. "Why? Why do you care so much about my son?" "Because he deserves better than what he's been given. And because walking away when someone needs help, that's not something I can live with." "Even if it destroys you?" Evelyn's throat tightened. "Even then." Mrs. Ortega finally looked at her. "You love him, don't you, Mr. Ryder?" Evelyn's breath caught. It's all right. I can see it." A sad smile crossed the woman's face. "The way he looks at you when you're not watching. The way you look at him when he is. That kind of thing is hard to hide." Evelyn didn't know what to say. "Be careful," Mrs. Ortega said quietly. "Men like Victor Hale, they don't just destroy the people they hate. They destroy the people those people love too." The warning settled over Evelyn like a weight she couldn't shake. That night, Caleb found her sitting on the porch of the main house, staring out at the dark prairie. "You're thinking too loud," he said. Evelyn almost smiled. "Is that possible?" "With you? Yeah." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "What's going on?" "Mrs. Ortega said something today about Hale, about how he doesn't just go after his enemies, he goes after the people they care about too." Caleb's jaw tightened. "She's not wrong. Then we're making you a target." "I've been a target since the day I let you stay here." "That's not funny." "Wasn't trying to be." Caleb looked at her. "You think I didn't know what opening this school would cost?" "I knew. I just didn't care." "Why not?" "Because some things are worth the fight." His voice was low. "And you're one of them." Evelyn's heart stumbled. "Caleb, I'm not good at this," he said. "Saying what I mean. Letting people in. I spent 5 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone, that it was safer that way." He paused. "And then you showed up half dead on a frozen road, and I couldn't just leave you there." "You could have." "No, I couldn't." His eyes locked on hers. "And I can't walk away now either, even if it would be smarter, even if it would be safer. I can't do it." Evelyn's vision blurred. "This is a terrible idea, probably. Hale's going to use it against us." "Let him try." "You don't understand." Her voice cracked. "I've already ruined one man's life by being in it. My fiancé left because I wasn't enough. My father died because I couldn't save him. And now you're risking everything you've built for a school that might not even survive the month. Stop." Caleb's hand found hers. "You didn't ruin anyone's life. Your fiancé was a coward who didn't deserve you. Your father's debts weren't your fault. And this school, what we're building here, that's not going to fail because of you. If it fails, it'll be because men like Hale would rather see people stay ignorant than give them a chance." Evelyn squeezed his hand, holding on tight. "I'm scared." "So am I." "Of what?" "Of losing this." His voice roughened. "Of losing you." Evelyn turned to face him fully. "You're not going to lose me." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "Because I'm not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to." "I won't." "Then we're stuck with each other." Caleb's mouth curved into something that almost looked like a smile. "Could be worse. Could be better too." "Yeah." He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. But I'll take what I can get. And then he kissed her. It was different from the first time. Slower, more deliberate, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth, the way she tasted, the sound she made when his hand came up to cradle her face. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "We can't hide this," Evelyn whispered. "I don't want to hide it. People will talk. Let them." Caleb's thumb brushed across her cheek. "I'm done pretending I don't care about you." Evelyn's chest ached. What if it makes things worse? Then we'll deal with it, together. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that love could be enough to fight off men like Hale and fears like the one sitting in her chest. But she'd learned a long time ago that wanting something didn't make it true. Still, she kissed him again. Because even if it was temporary, even if it was doomed, right now in this moment, it was real. And that was enough. Word spread faster than Evelyn expected. By the end of the week, everyone at Iron Creek Ridge knew that she and Caleb were together. The workers talked in low voices when she passed. Parents exchanged glances when she greeted them. Even the children seemed aware that something had shifted, though they didn't quite understand what. Most people didn't say anything directly, but Evelyn could feel their judgment like a physical weight. The first person to confront her was Brennan. He found her in the barn one afternoon, organizing books for the next day's lesson. "Can I speak with you, Miss Mercer?" Evelyn looked up. Brennan's expression was hard to read. "Of course." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "I've worked for Mr. Ryder for 8 years. He's a good man, fair, doesn't ask for more than he gives." "I know, but he's also a man who's been through enough." Brennan's voice was firm. "Lost his wife and daughter, spent years rebuilding himself from nothing, and now you're here and people are talking." Evelyn's chest tightened. "What are they saying?" "That you're using him, that you latched onto the first man who showed you kindness because you didn't have anywhere else to go." "That's not true." "I know it's not." Brennan's tone softened. "I've seen the way you look at him, and I've seen the way he looks at you. That's not manipulation, that's real." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Then why are you telling me this?" "Because people believing it's real doesn't mean they'll accept it." He paused. "Victor Hale's already spreading rumors, saying you seduced Caleb to get control of the ranch, saying the school's just a cover for you to worm your way into his life." Evelyn's stomach turned. "That's insane. Doesn't matter if it's true. It matters if people believe it." Brennan looked at her seriously. "And right now, some of them do." "What am I supposed to do, pretend I don't care about him?" "No. But you need to be ready for what's coming, because Hale's not going to stop until he's destroyed both of you." Evelyn nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Brennan turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm glad Caleb found you. He's been dead inside for a long time, and you brought him back." He walked out before she could respond. The rumors reached a breaking point 2 weeks later. Evelyn was teaching a lesson on geography when a man she didn't recognize appeared in the barn doorway. He was older, heavy-set, with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. "Miss Evelyn Mercer?" His voice was clipped. Evelyn's heart sank. "Yes?" "I need you to come with me." The children went silent. "Why?" Evelyn asked. "There's been a complaint filed against you, operating an illegal school, corrupting minors, and—" He paused. "Unlawful cohabitation with a man you're not married to." Evelyn's vision swam. "That's absurd." "Maybe, but the complaint's been filed and I have to investigate." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Let's go." "She's not going anywhere." Caleb appeared behind the sheriff, his face like stone. The sheriff sighed. "Mr. Ryder, I don't want trouble." "Then leave." "I can't do that. This is official business." "Official business based on lies." Caleb moved between the sheriff and Evelyn. "Victor Hale put you up to this." "Mr. Hale filed the complaint, yes, but that doesn't mean I can ignore it." "The hell it doesn't." Caleb's voice was ice. "You know as well as I do that this is harassment, nothing more." "Maybe. But until I investigate, I can't dismiss it." The sheriff looked past Caleb to Evelyn. "Ma'am, if you'll just come with me to town, we can sort this out." "No." Evelyn stepped forward. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me exactly what I'm being accused of." The sheriff pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Evelyn read it, her hands shaking. The complaint was brutal. It accused her of running an unlicensed institution in violation of territorial law, of indoctrinating children with dangerous ideas, of engaging in immoral behavior by living on the same property as Caleb Ryder without being married. And at the bottom, in neat handwriting, was Victor Hale's signature. "This is insane," Evelyn whispered. "Maybe, but it's legal." The sheriff's expression was almost apologetic. "I have to take you in for questioning. If you're innocent, you'll be cleared, but you have to come with me." "She's not going." Caleb's voice was flat. "Mr. Ryder, don't make me arrest you too. Try it." The tension stretched tight, and then a small voice cut through the silence. "Wait." Everyone turned. Lena stood at the front of the classroom, her hands clenched at her sides. "Miss Mercer didn't do anything wrong," the girl said. The sheriff frowned. "Sweetheart, this is grown-up business." "No, it's not. It's about the school. And the school is ours." Lena's voice was stronger now. "Miss Mercer teaches us. She doesn't tell us what to think. She just shows us how to read and write and do numbers. And she's nice to us even when we make mistakes." Another child stood up, Daniel, one of the Irish boys. "She's the only teacher who ever let me come to school. The one in town said I was too poor." Rosa stood next. "She helped my mama learn to read too, at night after we finished class." One by one, the children stood. All 12 of them. June, the quiet Chinese boy, spoke last. "She saved Miguel. When his papa hurt him, she didn't look away. She helped him." The sheriff looked around at the children, his expression shifting. "These kids believe in her," Caleb said quietly. "Their parents trust her. The only person who has a problem with her is Victor Hale, and that's because she's doing something he can't control." The sheriff was silent for a long moment. Then he folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. "I'll file my report, but I'm going to recommend the complaint be dismissed. Hale's not going to like that. Hale can take it up with the territorial judge." The sheriff tipped his hat to Evelyn. "Ma'am." He walked out. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. She sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. The children rushed forward, surrounding her. "Are you okay, Miss Mercer?" Lena asked. Evelyn nodded, even though she wasn't sure. Caleb crouched beside her. "You all right?" "I don't know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "How much more of this can we take?" "As much as we have to." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. Us. That night, Caleb called a meeting with everyone who worked the ranch. Evelyn stood beside him in the yard, watching as the workers gathered. 30 people, maybe more. Men and women who'd spent years building this place alongside Caleb. "I'm not going to waste your time," Caleb started. "You all know what's been happening. Hale's been coming after the school, after Miss Mercer, and he's not going to stop." The crowd murmured. "I'm not asking any of you to fight my battles," Caleb continued, "but I need you to know what's at stake here. This school isn't just about teaching kids to read. It's about proving that people like us, people who've been told we don't matter, can build something that lasts, something that no one can take away." He paused. "Hale wants to shut us down because he knows that if we succeed, his control over this territory is finished. And I'll be damned if I let him win." Brennan stepped forward. "What do you need from us?" "I need you to stand with me. If Hale comes back, I need you to show him that he's not just fighting me. He's fighting all of us." Mateo spoke next. "And if he brings the law?" "Then we make sure the law knows the truth, that this school is legal, that Miss Mercer has done nothing wrong, and that anyone who says otherwise is a liar." The workers exchanged glances. Then one by one, they nodded. "We're with you, boss," Brennan said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Thank you." The crowd dispersed slowly, talking among themselves. Evelyn stood there, overwhelmed by what had just happened. "They believe in this," she said quietly. "They believe in you," Caleb corrected. "I don't deserve that." "Yeah, you do." He looked at her. "You've given them something to believe in. That's not nothing." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What if we lose?" "Then we lose fighting, and that's better than not fighting at all." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that fighting wasn't always worth it, that sometimes surrender was the only way to survive. But she didn't, because deep down, she knew he was right. The final confrontation came on a cold morning in late March. Evelyn was in the barn, preparing for the day's lessons, when she heard the sound of horses. A lot of horses. She stepped outside and froze. Victor Hale sat at the front of a group of men, at least 20 of them, some wearing deputy badges, others just armed townspeople. And beside Hale was Marshal Teague, his expression grim. "Miss Mercer," Hale called out. "We need to talk." Evelyn's heart pounded. "About what?" "About the fact that you're operating an illegal institution, harboring a child against his father's wishes, and engaging in behavior that violates territorial morality laws." "We've been through this already," Evelyn said. "The sheriff investigated. He found nothing." "The sheriff is not the final authority." Hale dismounted, walking closer. "The marshal is. And he's here to shut you down." Marshal Teague stepped forward. "Miss Mercer, I've reviewed the complaint. And while I agree that some of the accusations are exaggerated, there are legitimate concerns about the legality of your operation." "This is a private school on private land," Evelyn said. "There's nothing illegal about it." "That's where you're wrong." Hale pulled a paper from his coat. "Territorial law requires all educational institutions to be licensed and inspected by the territory's education board. You have no such license." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "That law applies to public schools. It applies to all schools." Hale's smile was vicious. "And since you're teaching more than 10 children on a regular basis, you're in violation. That's insane." "It's the law." The marshal's voice was firm. "I'm sorry, Miss Mercer, but I have to shut this down." "No." Caleb's voice cut through the air. He walked out of the main house, flanked by Brennan, Mateo, and a dozen other ranch workers. "You're not shutting down anything," Caleb said. Hale's eyes gleamed. "Are you really going to defy the law, Caleb?" "I'm going to defy you. There's a difference." The marshal has the authority to investigate, not to destroy." Caleb stopped in front of Teague. "You've seen the school. You've talked to the children. You know this isn't some criminal operation. It's a teacher trying to give kids a chance." "I understand that," Teague said, "but the law is the law." "Then change the law." "I can't do that." "Then you're just Hale's puppet." Caleb's voice was cold. "And you're no better than he is." Teague's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, Ryder." "Or what? You'll arrest me?" "Go ahead, arrest all of us." Caleb gestured to the workers behind him. "See how that plays when word gets out that you shut down a school for teaching poor kids to read?" The marshal hesitated, and in that moment, Evelyn saw it. Doubt. "Marshal Teague," she said quietly. "Can I show you something?" Teague frowned. "What?" "Come inside, just for a minute." He looked at Hale, who nodded reluctantly. Evelyn led the marshal into the barn. The children were sitting at their benches, silent and wide-eyed. "This is what you're shutting down," Evelyn said. 12 children who've never been allowed in a school before, who are learning to read and write for the first time in their lives." She walked to the front of the room and picked up a piece of paper from her desk. "This is a letter Lena Chen wrote yesterday. She's 6 years old. 3 months ago, she couldn't write her own name. Now she's writing complete sentences." Evelyn handed the paper to the marshal. He read it slowly. It was a simple letter, just a few lines about wanting to be a teacher when she grew up. But the handwriting was careful, the words spelled correctly. "These children aren't a threat," Evelyn said. "They're the future. And if you shut this down, you're telling them that the future isn't for people like them." The marshal stared at the letter for a long time. Then he handed it back. "I'll need to file a report with the education board," he said. "But I'm going to recommend they grant you a temporary license while we sort this out." Hale's face went red. That's my decision," Teague said firmly. He looked at Evelyn. "You'll need to formalize your operation. Get proper documentation. But for now, you can keep teaching." Evelyn's breath rushed out. "Thank you." The marshal nodded. He walked out of the barn, mounted his horse, and rode off without another word. Hale stood there, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Caleb said. "It is." Hale's hands clenched into fists, but he didn't argue. He just turned and rode away, his men following. The moment they were gone, the barn erupted. The children cheered. The workers clapped Caleb on the back. Mrs. Ortega hugged Evelyn so hard she could barely breathe. And Evelyn stood there, surrounded by people who'd fought for her, and finally let herself believe. They'd won. The celebration didn't last long. That night, as the workers drifted back to their quarters and the children were sent home with their parents, Evelyn sat in the barn alone, staring at the empty benches. They'd won. The marshal had sided with them. Hale had been forced to retreat, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still coming. Caleb found her there an hour later. "You should be celebrating," he said. "I don't feel like celebrating." He sat down beside her. "Why not?" "Because Hale's not the kind of man who accepts defeat. He'll come back. And next time he'll be ready." "Maybe. But so will we." Evelyn looked at him. "What if we're not? What if next time the marshal doesn't side with us? What if the parents change their minds again? What if—" "Stop." Caleb's hand covered hers. "You're borrowing trouble that hasn't happened yet. I can't help it. I've spent my whole life waiting for things to fall apart, and every time I think I've found something solid, it crumbles. This won't. You don't know that." "No," Caleb admitted, "but I know that sitting here worrying about it won't change anything. All we can do is keep moving forward, keep teaching, keep building, and trust that it'll be enough." Evelyn wanted to believe him, but trust had never come easy to her. Still, she squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on this. On me." Caleb's expression softened. "I couldn't give up on you if I tried." He leaned in and kissed her, slow and gentle, like he had all the time in the world, and for a moment, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe they did. The next few weeks brought changes Evelyn hadn't expected. Word of the confrontation spread through the territory faster than fire through dry grass. Parents who'd pulled their children from the school started asking questions. Workers from neighboring ranches came by to see what all the fuss was about. Even a few families from Dry Hollow, people who'd never spoken to Evelyn before, showed up asking if their children could attend. By mid-April, the school had 23 students. Evelyn had to reorganize the entire structure. She split the children into 3 groups instead of 2, beginners, intermediate, and advanced. She extended the school day by an hour to accommodate everyone, and she started holding evening classes twice a week for adults who wanted to learn. The evening classes were Caleb's idea. "You've got parents who can't read contracts they're signing," he'd said. "Women who can't write letters to family back home. Men who get cheated on wages because they can't do the math fast enough. Teach them." So she did. The first night, only 3 people showed up. By the 3rd week, there were 50. Rosa's mother learned to write her own name for the first time at 42. One of the German ranch hands discovered he could read entire passages from newspapers if someone slowed down long enough to help him sound out the words. Mrs. Ortega brought her sister, who brought her neighbor, who brought her cousin. The barn became more than a school. It became a gathering place, a community. And for the first time since leaving Boston, Evelyn felt like she was exactly where she belonged. But Hale didn't disappear. He stopped coming to the ranch, but his presence lingered like smoke. Rumors still circulated through Dry Hollow, whispers that Evelyn was poisoning children's minds, that Caleb had been bewitched, that the school was just a front for something darker. Most people ignored the rumors, but not everyone. One afternoon, a man named Garrett Finch showed up at the ranch with his 2 sons in tow. He was a hard-looking man, weathered and angry, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much disappointment. "I'm pulling my boys out," he told Evelyn. She looked at the 2 children, both around 10 years old, both staring at the ground. "Why?" "Because I don't need some woman from back east telling them they're better than their old man." Evelyn's chest tightened. "I've never said that." "Maybe not in those exact words, but that's what they're hearing." Garrett's voice was bitter. "My oldest came home yesterday and told me I was wrong about something. Wrong. Like he knows better than me now because you taught him to read a few books. Learning to think for yourself isn't the same as disrespecting your father. Feels the same from where I'm standing." Evelyn stepped closer. "Mr. Finch, I'm not trying to take your sons away from you. I'm trying to give them tools they can use to build better lives." "Better than what? Better than me?" Garrett's face reddened. "I've worked my whole life to keep them fed and clothed, and now they look at me like I'm some kind of failure." "That's not—" "Save it." He grabbed his sons by their shoulders. Come on, boys. We're leaving. The older boy looked back at Evelyn, his eyes pleading, but he didn't say anything. They left. Evelyn stood there, her hands shaking, and felt the familiar weight of failure settling back over her. Caleb found her sitting outside the barn an hour later. I heard what happened, he said. I lost them. Evelyn's voice was hollow. I pushed too hard, and I lost them. You didn't push too hard. Finch is scared. Of what? Of his sons outgrowing him, of realizing they don't have to live the same life he did. Caleb sat down beside her. That's not your fault. It feels like it is. Yeah, well, feelings aren't always right. Evelyn almost smiled. You're terrible at comforting people. I know. He paused. But I'm good at telling the truth. And the truth is you can't save everyone. Some people don't want to be saved. Some people are too afraid of what comes after. That doesn't make it easier. No. But it makes it real. Caleb looked at her. You've changed lives here, Evelyn. 23 kids who wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. 15 adults learning to read. That's not nothing. It's not enough. It's more than anyone else has ever done. Evelyn closed her eyes. What if I'm not strong enough for this? You are. How do you know? Because you're still here. After everything Hale's thrown at you, after every setback and every loss, you're still here, still teaching, still fighting. His hand found hers. That's strength. Evelyn squeezed his fingers, holding on like he was the only solid thing in the world. Spring turned into summer and the school kept growing. The Territorial Education Board granted Evelyn a provisional license, contingent on her meeting certain standards. She had to submit lesson plans, keep attendance records, allow periodic inspections. It was bureaucratic and frustrating, but she did it. Because the alternative was losing everything they'd built. The children thrived. Lena was reading at a level far beyond her age. Miguel had discovered a talent for mathematics that stunned everyone, including himself. The Irish boys were writing stories, crude and messy, but full of imagination. Rosa had started teaching younger children during recess, her patience and kindness making her a natural leader. And the adults kept coming to evening classes, hungry for knowledge they'd been denied their entire lives. One night after everyone had left, Mrs. Ortega approached Evelyn. I wanted to thank you, she said. Evelyn looked up from organizing papers. For what? For giving me my son back. For showing me that I didn't have to accept the life I had. Mrs. Ortega's eyes were wet. I spent 15 years married to a man who told me I was worthless, who beat me when I questioned him, who made me believe I deserved it. Evelyn's throat tightened. But watching Miguel learn, watching him become confident and strong, it made me realize something. Mrs. Ortega's voice shook. If he could change, so could I. If he could walk away from a life that hurt him, so could I. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met, Evelyn said quietly. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified most of the time. Mrs. Ortega smiled through her tears. But I also feel free, and that's because of you. Evelyn hugged her, and the two of them stood there in the quiet barn, holding each other up. The final reckoning with Victor Hale came in late June. Evelyn was teaching a lesson on American history when Caleb appeared in the doorway, his expression dark. We need to talk, he said. Evelyn excused herself and stepped outside. What's wrong? Hales filed another complaint, this time with the territorial governor. Caleb's jaw was tight. He's claiming the school is operating in violation of multiple laws, and that I'm sheltering a fugitive. A fugitive? Who? You. Evelyn's blood went cold. On what grounds? He's dug up your past, found out about your father's debts, claims you fled Boston to avoid creditors, and that you're wanted for fraud. That's insane. My father's debts were settled before I left. The lawyer handled everything. Do you have proof? Evelyn's heart sank. I have letters, documentation, but they're all back in Boston. Then we need to get them. That'll take weeks, maybe months. I'll send a telegram. Have someone retrieve the documents and send them here. Caleb's voice was firm. But in the meantime, you need to stay close. If Hale convinces the governor to issue a warrant, they'll arrest you. Evelyn's hands shook. This is never going to end, is it? It will. We just have to outlast him. And if we can't? Caleb stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. Then we go down fighting, together. Done. The waiting was torture. Every day, Evelyn expected to see lawmen riding up to the ranch. Every night, she lay awake imagining what would happen if they arrested her, if they dragged her back to Boston, if everything she'd built here crumbled. But the days passed, and no one came. 2 weeks after Caleb sent the telegram, a package arrived from Boston. Inside were letters from her father's lawyer, bank statements showing the debts had been paid, and a signed affidavit confirming that Evelyn Mercer had no outstanding legal obligations in Massachusetts. Caleb took the documents to the territorial capital himself, delivering them directly to the governor's office. When he returned 3 days later, his expression was grim. "What happened?" Evelyn asked. The governor dismissed Hale's complaint, said there was no evidence to support the fraud claim. Caleb paused. But he also said that Hale's made enough noise that people are starting to pay attention, and not in a good way. What does that mean? It means we need to be careful. The governor doesn't want a scandal, and if Hale keeps pushing, the easiest solution is to shut down the school and make the problem go away. Evelyn's chest tightened. So we're right back where we started. Not exactly. Caleb pulled a folded letter from his coat. The governor also sent this. Evelyn took the letter and read it. It was an official invitation to present the school's progress to the Territorial Education Board at their annual meeting in August. If the board approved, the school would receive full accreditation and funding. This is, Evelyn's voice broke. This is everything. It's a chance, Caleb corrected. Nothing more. But it's a real chance. An official one. Yeah. His mouth curved into something almost like a smile. It is. Evelyn threw her arms around him, holding on tight. For the first time in months, she let herself hope. The next 6 weeks were a blur of preparation. Evelyn worked with the children to compile samples of their work, essays, arithmetic problems, reading logs. She documented attendance records, lesson plans, and testimonials from parents. She even convinced a few of the adult students to write letters explaining how the evening classes had changed their lives. The school became a machine of organized chaos. Everyone contributed. The children practiced their penmanship until their hands cramped. The parents helped build portfolios. Caleb hired a photographer from Helena to take pictures of the barn, the students, and the makeshift library they'd built. By the time August arrived, Evelyn had a presentation that she hoped would prove the school's worth. Caleb insisted on coming with her to the territorial capital. "You don't have to do that," Evelyn said. "I know, but I'm doing it anyway." They made the journey together, 3 days by train and stagecoach, staying in cramped boarding houses along the way. On the morning of the presentation, Evelyn stood in front of a mirror in their rented room and tried to calm her racing heart. "You're going to be fine," Caleb said from behind her. "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." He rested his hands on her shoulders. "You've fought too hard to fail now." Evelyn turned to face him. "What if it's not enough? Then we'll figure out what comes next. Together." She kissed him, drawing strength from the solid certainty of his presence. The Territorial Education Board meeting was held in a stuffy government building that smelled like old paper and linseed oil. Evelyn sat in a hard wooden chair, clutching her portfolio, while 5 board members reviewed her materials. They asked questions, lots of them. Why did she choose to teach immigrant children? What qualifications did she have? How did she fund the school? What were her long-term goals? Evelyn answered each one as honestly as she could. And then Victor Hale walked in. He wasn't on the board, but he'd been invited to present a counter-argument. Of course he had. "Gentlemen," Hale began, his voice smooth, "Miss Mercer is a well-meaning woman, but she's also dangerously naive. She's operating a school without proper oversight, teaching children ideas that run counter to their family values, and creating division in communities that were perfectly stable before she arrived." "That's not true," Evelyn said. Hale smiled. "Isn't it? How many families have pulled their children from your school because they were uncomfortable with what you were teaching?" "A few. But more have enrolled since then. Because you've convinced them that their children need to be educated. But what you're really doing is undermining parental authority and destabilizing the social order." One of the board members frowned. "Are you suggesting that educating children is destabilizing?" "I'm suggesting that education should reinforce community values, not challenge them." Hale's voice was firm. And Miss Mercer's approach does the opposite. Evelyn stood. Mr. Hale's real concern isn't about community values. It's about control. He runs the only school in Dry Hollow, and he decides who gets educated and who doesn't. My school threatens that control because it offers an alternative. An unlicensed alternative, Hale shot back. A necessary alternative. Evelyn's voice grew stronger. The children I teach have been denied access to education their entire lives. Not because they're incapable, not because their parents don't care, but because men like Mr. Hale have decided they're not worthy. That's an outrageous accusation. Is it? Evelyn pulled a document from her portfolio. This is a letter from the parents of 12 students currently enrolled in my school. All of them tried to enroll their children in Dry Hollow's public school. All of them were turned away. She handed the letter to the board chairman. He read it slowly, his expression darkening. Mr. Hale, the chairman said, is this accurate? Hale's jaw tightened. The public school has limited capacity. We have to prioritize students who are most likely to benefit. Based on what criteria? Academic readiness, family background, financial stability. In other words, you exclude poor children. I exclude children who aren't prepared to succeed. And who decides that? Evelyn's voice was sharp. You? One man with the power to determine which children deserve a future and which don't. Hale's face reddened. This is absurd. I've dedicated my career to education. You've dedicated your career to maintaining power, Evelyn interrupted. And my school is proof that your system is broken. The room went silent. The board chairman set down the letter. Miss Mercer, do you have evidence that your students are actually learning? Evelyn pulled out the portfolio. I have writing samples from children who couldn't write their names 6 months ago. I have arithmetic tests from students who are now performing at grade level, and I have testimonials from parents who've seen their children transformed. She spread the materials across the table. The board members leaned in, examining the work. One of them picked up a perfectly written essay from Lena. Another studied Miguel's math problems. A third read a letter from Mrs. Ortega describing how the school had saved her son's life. Finally, the chairman spoke. Mr. Hale, you've raised concerns about Miss Mercer's qualifications and methods, but based on the evidence presented here, it appears her students are thriving. That doesn't... It does. The chairman's voice was firm. This board's responsibility is to ensure that all children in the territory have access to quality education. And from what I can see, Miss Mercer is providing that. Hale's face went white. The board will vote on whether to grant full accreditation to Iron Creek Ridge School, the chairman continued. All in favor? 4 hands went up. Opposed? 1 hand, the youngest board member, who looked uncomfortable but defiant. Motion passes. The chairman looked at Evelyn. Congratulations, Miss Mercer. Your school is officially recognized. Evelyn's knees nearly buckled. Hale stood abruptly. This is a mistake. That's your opinion, the chairman said, but it's not the board's decision. Hale stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Evelyn stood there shaking, unable to believe what had just happened. Caleb was waiting outside the building when she emerged. Well? He asked. Evelyn's face broke into a smile, the first real smile she'd felt in months. We won. Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You won, he corrected. I just watched. No. Evelyn pulled back, looking up at him. We won. Together. And for the first time since stepping off that train in the freezing darkness, Evelyn felt like she was finally home. The ride back to Iron Creek Ridge felt different. Lighter, somehow. Like the weight that had been pressing down on Evelyn's chest for months had finally lifted. They didn't talk much. They just sat side by side in the stagecoach, watching the Montana landscape roll past, and let the silence settle around them. When they finally arrived at the ranch, the entire community was waiting. Someone had spread the word. The workers, the parents, the children, they were all gathered in the yard, cheering as Evelyn and Caleb climbed down from the coach. Lena ran forward and threw her arms around Evelyn. We heard! The school is real now! It was always real, Evelyn said, her voice thick. But now it's forever, Lena said. Evelyn's throat tightened. Yeah, now it's forever. The celebration lasted late into the night. There was food and music and laughter, things Evelyn hadn't experienced in so long they felt almost foreign. But this time, she let herself enjoy it, because they'd earned it. Chama. Later, after the crowd had dispersed and the ranch had gone quiet, Evelyn found Caleb standing on the porch of the main house, staring out at the dark prairie. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how different things are now." He turned to look at her. "A year ago, I was just surviving, going through the motions. And now I have something to live for again." His voice was rough. "You gave me that." Evelyn stepped closer. "You gave it to me, too." Caleb reached for her hand, his fingers threading through hers. "What do you want, Evelyn? Long term, not just the school. You." She thought about the life she'd imagined back in Boston, safe, predictable, small, and about the life she had now, messy, uncertain, but full of purpose. "I want to keep teaching," she said. "I want to watch these kids grow up and become more than anyone ever expected them to be. I want to expand the school, build a real building, hire more teachers." She paused. "And I want to do it with you." Caleb's expression softened. "Is that a proposal?" Evelyn laughed. "Maybe. Is that a yes?" "Yeah." He pulled her close. "It is." They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, and watched the stars come out over the Montana sky. The school continued to grow. By the following spring, enrollment had doubled. Evelyn hired 2 assistant teachers, both women from immigrant families who'd learned to read in her evening classes and wanted to give back. They built a second classroom onto the barn and started offering classes 6 days a week. The Territorial Education Board sent an inspector in May. She spent 3 days observing lessons, interviewing students, and reviewing records. When she left, she gave the school a glowing report. Word spread beyond the territory. Families from neighboring counties started sending their children. A newspaper in Helena wrote an article about the Frontier School transforming immigrant children's lives. Donations started arriving, books, supplies, even money from people who believed in what they were doing. Evelyn and Caleb were married in June in a quiet ceremony on the ranch with the entire community in attendance. Lena served as flower girl. Miguel stood beside Caleb as his best man, his face glowing with pride. Mrs. Ortega cried through the entire ceremony, and when the preacher asked if anyone objected, the silence was absolute. Because there was nothing left to object to. They'd built something real, something lasting, something no one could take away. 2 years later, Evelyn stood in front of a brand new schoolhouse, a proper building with glass windows, wooden floors, and enough space for 50 students. It had taken a year to build and more money than she'd ever imagined having. But they'd done it. The community had raised funds, the territorial government had provided a grant, and Caleb had poured his own savings into making sure it was done right. The sign above the door read, Iron Creek Ridge School, founded 1882. Evelyn ran her fingers over the carved letters and felt tears prick her eyes. "You did it," Caleb said from behind her. "We did it," she corrected. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about the woman who stepped off that train 3 years ago, the one who thought her life was over." Evelyn's voice was soft. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Neither did I. Evelyn turned in his arms. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" "Not for a second." She kissed him, long and slow, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. This was home. Not the building, not the land, but the people. The community they'd built together. The lives they'd changed, and the love that had grown between them, messy and complicated and absolutely real. Oik. That fall, Lena Chen became the first student from Iron Creek Ridge to enroll in a secondary school in Helena. She left on a crisp September morning, her bags packed and her eyes bright with excitement. Before she climbed onto the stagecoach, she hugged Evelyn. "Thank you," Lena whispered, "for everything." "You did this yourself," Evelyn said. "I just showed you the door." "No." Lena pulled back, her expression serious. You showed me I could walk through it. That's different. Evelyn's throat tightened. Make us proud. I will. And she did. Miguel followed 2 years later, enrolling in a mathematics program at the Territorial University. Rosa became a teacher herself, taking over one of the elementary classes at Iron Creek Ridge. The Irish boys, Daniel, Patrick, and Sean, went on to start their own businesses, using the literacy and numeracy skills they'd learned to negotiate contracts and manage accounts. Every success felt like a vindication, proof that what they'd built mattered. But the real proof came in the quieter moments. When a mother who'd never learned to read finally wrote her first letter to family back home. When a father who'd been cheated his entire life caught a merchant trying to shortchange him and demanded the correct amount. When a child stood up in class and asked a question no one had ever taught them to ask before. Those were the moments that mattered. Because education wasn't just about reading and writing and arithmetic, it was about dignity, agency, the right to shape your own future instead of accepting the one someone else decided you deserved. And that was worth fighting for. Plus, 5 years after stepping off the train in Dry Hollow, Evelyn stood on the porch of the house she now shared with Caleb and watched the sun rise over Iron Creek Ridge. The school was thriving, the community was strong, and the children, those beautiful, resilient children, were growing into exactly the kind of people the world needed. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep. Thinking about something? Evelyn smiled, about how close I came to giving up. That first night when I was freezing on that road, I was ready to die. I thought there was nothing left worth living for. Caleb handed her a cup. And now? Now I can't imagine my life any other way. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You know what I think? What? I think you were never meant to survive that night. You were meant to live. There's a difference. Evelyn's eyes stung. Yeah, there is. They sat in silence, watching the sky turn from gray to gold. In the distance, Evelyn could hear the sounds of the ranch waking up, workers heading to the barns, children's voices drifting from the cabins, the steady rhythm of a life built on purpose and hope. And somewhere in that noise, she heard the faint echo of the person she used to be, the woman who thought she had nothing left to offer the world. That woman was gone now. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd learned that surviving wasn't the same as living. That love wasn't about perfection, but about showing up even when it was hard. That building something meaningful required more than good intentions. It required stubborn, relentless refusal to give up. Evelyn had learned those lessons the hard way. But she'd learned them. And now, sitting beside the man who'd saved her life by refusing to let her stay dead inside, watching the sun rise over a community they'd built together, she finally understood what her mother had been trying to tell her all those years ago. Life wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about deciding what you were willing to fight for when failure came. Evelyn had chosen to fight. And in fighting, she'd found something more valuable than safety or certainty or any of the things she'd thought she wanted back in Boston. She'd found home, not a place, but a purpose, and a love that refused to stay hidden. Caleb's hand found hers, his fingers warm and rough and familiar. I love you, he said quietly. I love you too. They sat there together, 2 broken people who'd learned how to build something whole, and watched the sun climb higher in the Montana sky. Somewhere in the schoolhouse, a bell rang. The children would be arriving soon. Lessons would start. The day would unfold in its beautiful, chaotic, imperfect way, and Evelyn would be there for all of it, not because she had to be, but because she chose to be. Because this, right here, right now, was exactly where she was meant to be. Home.